Karma in its essence is a law of cause and effect. It's a way of balancing. It's a way of balance. It is how the creation keeps things in balance, whether on a small individual level or larger fields of collective consciousness karma. Every field of consciousness, we may say, within the creation has karma. So it can be the collective karma of humanity, the karma of the planet Earth, apart from humanity, because it has been here much longer than human beings. Animal kingdom has its own karma, and this galaxy has its own karma, and this universe, Brahmanda, which we inhabit, has its own karma. Every deed is accounted indeed. So every action, thought, intention, and deed, whether mental, emotional, or physical, it creates ripples of karma. It attracts the particles of karma that then accumulates around the soul and other vehicles of consciousness. While conditioning, on the other hand, is more about habitual patterns and behaviors, or we may say it is a certain programming that is received, societal norms, cultural norms, human, common life norms. As the person, as the little child, the little infant enters this world, the newborn baby is very receptive, is very open, and it begins to download. It begins to receive and to download the fields of information, fields of energy. The infant is the most open state. You become so open as an infant when you come to full consciousness. Full circle complete. So the infant, however, has no defense mechanisms. It has no experience. It has no countermeasures. While in full consciousness, your openness is a certain strength that you have attained in transcending those fields of consciousness and conditioning. So when the infant comes to the earth, without even schooling, which usually starts at the age of 5 or 6 or so, even before that, the infant already receives the collective consciousness and all of its limitations, all of its flaws. It already downloads the collective karma, we may say, but more in terms of what is accepted as a acceptable programming. And let me tell you that governments are very good at that. They're very good at social programming because government means mind and govern means governing the mind. So our governments, first and foremost, are here to govern the minds. And by governing the minds consciously and subconsciously, they create a certain system of behavior. Makes sense. However, some governments are overdoing it very much. We are very well aware of that. So conditioning is instilled. It is habitually trained. And of course, parents they give their conditioning and karma to their children. So that is called usually family karma or ancestral karma. Then the child has its own soul karma, personal karma, which is in addition to ancestral karma, and also receives conditioning as part of a package, as a gift package of coming to life on earth. What a beginning. What a gift pack, isn't it? Yes, but putting things aside, it's beautiful to see that nowadays, well, in the last few decades, actually, the new wave of consciousness is arising. So the young children are coming with higher consciousness and they're not receiving conditioning so well. So they have trouble at school, which is great because they're here to dismantle the school because the school is not natural. So they come with this higher consciousness and they say, we're just not going to follow the old systems. We're not going to fall for the old conditioning ways. So therefore, many, many millions and millions of children born now are of higher consciousness. They have less karma and they're resisting the conditioning systems. Conditioning is not equal to karma. Conditioning can reinforce karma, but positive conditioning can counteract karma. There is very few examples of positive conditioning. Some of those would be in more remote areas of the world where children are raised by conscious parents in a conscious educational systems. So as the child is growing up in a more conscious educational environment, which even still today, it's very few pockets around the world that do that. That way, when the child receives a positive conditioning, assists in growing up in a more conscious way. So it counteracts the karmic effects. But when conditioning is more suppressive, which is majority of educational systems in the world, then all of you remember those days in the school when you were sitting there and you were questioning what the heck I'm doing here. I'm not going to need this for sure in my life. Even as a child, I remember when I was sitting in the school and it's just, why do I have to learn these, let's say, meaningless historical facts? And I know I'm not going to need those in my life 100%, but yet you have to because that's how it's designed. Or, some people love chemistry, some people don't. Biology or so on. So, of course, some things are necessary to learn, but then everybody should have a choice. So, you know what I mean. Everybody has experienced that. So, conditioning, which is more habitual, programmed, even more so suppressive, can really affect one's life negatively because it creates a low consciousness environment. It creates a suppressive environment. Therefore, for a person to break free from conditioning and to begin their spiritual path is difficult. It can also be societal or cultural conditioning. So, for example, cultural expectations. In some cultures, there is a religious suppression that you just have to follow that religion. You have to do it in that way, and it's very strong. In the West now, it's less common, but in the Islamic countries, it's still very strong, or some other parts of the world. In certain religions or culture environments, they do not allow to do various things because of those religious doctrines. So there can be so many expressions of that. Very commonly, there is a very famous conditioning, which is emotional suppression. It is constantly reinforced that you can't be vulnerable, you shouldn't be sad, you shouldn't express your emotions, especially if you're a man. You should just be tough man and you can't express yourself emotionally. Common suppressions and expressions are reinforced for males and females. So much of it is literally everywhere. The governments use conditioning for their benefit of controlling the society, educational systems. Marketing is also conditioning in a very large extent. Now we have social media, we have technology that some of it is used for negative conditioning as well. Breaking free from conditioning requires conscious effort and consistent practice to rewire those patterns, ingrained patterns and behaviors. So it takes a lot of effort to change yourself. There is a quote actually. When I was young, I wanted to change the world. And when I grew wiser, I realized that I have to change myself. So, first, of course, it starts with yourself. And when you shed the conditioning from your system, you become more free. Then the next level, of course, is karma. And karma is much more complex because that relates not to the external environment and surroundings, but to the inner spiritual reality. And there are four types of karma, which we have covered previously in the satsang. And I have written about it in my newest book of soul liberation and divine cosmology. So, coming back a little bit to conditioning, breaking free from it requires conscious effort. The very first steps are mindfulness practices, the beginner's meditations, where you develop the present moment awareness. You start to recognize, what am I doing now? How am I behaving right now? What thought patterns am I supporting now? So you start to keep an eye on yourself. It's called present moment awareness and self-observation. And the very first thing that we teach is non-judgment. Do not judge yourself. Observe, but don't judge. Because judgment is another layer of conditioning which suppresses the previous suppression. So it's a double lock mechanism. So by non-judgmental attitude, you observe yourself and you allow to gain some insight and step by step to decondition yourself. Self-inquiry is very good in reflecting on everything within yourself. That's deeper work. Getting exposed to new perspectives, such as new philosophies, new cultures, new ideas, is very healthy. Usually people do this naturally when they travel. They start to see different cultures and different religious ways, and it starts to open their mind, starts to expand their world, and to challenge deeply rooted assumptions. Deep inner healing is required. Inner child healing, emotional healing. mental healing, psychological healing, layers upon layers upon layers, you discover more and more and more subtler and subtler conditioning that you have absorbed in one way or another. It's surprising how much there is when you go subtler and subtler. But of course, at the very top of the ocean, at the surface level, conscious reprogramming is necessary. So, conditioning and karma is not the same thing. Good conditioning can be very supportive, very helpful, because when a child is young, it can be helpful to have positive conditioning because it prepares for the challenges of life, whether mental, emotional, psychological, or physical challenges of life. But that is a rare example still today. Now, some people assume that by deconditioning themselves, they will become free. That is not the truth, because this is what millions and millions of people try to do, especially there is a new movement called biohacking. So they adopt all sorts of new age techniques and binaural beats and various supplements to hack their brain and to hack the matrix conditioning. Only the deconditioning efforts will allow one to work through the emotional stuff up to the inner light awakening. We actually distinguish the inner light awakening, and right before it, there is the rational mind, which is beyond emotions, but it's not yet spiritual. It hasn't received that light, that spiritual light. So it's beyond emotions, yes, but it's not reaching the spiritual level yet. So this is how far one can go by only deconditioning work.